So seaweed, the reason that why we love her is she's one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. So each species has a slightly different nutrition profile. As a kale and as a spinach, would have a slightly different nutrition profile. But broadly, we're talking high quality protein, dietary fiber, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, bioactives, phytonutrients, and it's the regular consumption of seaweed that has been linked with reduced rates of metabolic syndrome disease and hormonal imbalance in communities that are eating seaweed regularly in Korea, in Japan, in Okinawa. There is also an interesting correlation between communities that are living the longest, healthiest lives and the consumption of seaweed. So there's something interesting there also with this blue zone diet and longevity.
Menopause has long been shrouded in secrecy, leaving many clueless, ashamed, and embarrassed to seek and extend support for one of the most natural transitions and rite of passage. Well, the spirit and mood have changed. People are surrendering to curiosity, knowledge, and empowerment. In this podcast, I'll share my own experiences and point of view, peek into the lifestyle and self-care practices of people experiencing menopause, and tap experts for their take on the pausal phase. This is for you if you are one of the millions of people in the menopausal phase or want to support them. I'm Dixie Lincoln Nichols, health and well-being educator and wellness founder. This is the Pause Pod. I'm super excited for the conversation today with my guests. They are rootless and on a mission. With a decade of experience in international climate change solutions and a master's in environmental management from Yale University, Sachi Singh is well aware of what we're collectively up against. In seaweed, she found hope. Seaweed is one of the most nutritious foods on the planet and actively regenerates the environment in which it is grown. Yet, most of us don't eat it on a daily basis. Sachi is trying to change that with Rootless and its hero product, the Daily Bite, an innovative food-based supplement that delivers the transformative benefits of seaweed deliciously. Since its debut in 2022, the Daily Bites have been helping women and people achieve hormonal balance, sustain all-day energy, and nurture their gut health. Today, Sachi is on a mission to build a better food system while empowering 1 billion women to reclaim their health and feel good about their bodies during hormonal transitions, including menopause, pregnancy, and beyond, all through seaweed. Joining Sachi is Chief of Staff of Rootless, Dr. Gabby. After spending her career at the intersection of food innovation, plant-based medicine, community building, and women's health, she too is excited about the potential to change the narrative of food as medicine, not only for us, but also for our planet. Gabby's doctorate in acupuncture and Chinese medicine has helped her understand this concept even more clearly. After being on hormonal birth control at an extremely young age due to horribly painful cramps and fainting during that time of the month, she spent most of her life covering the symptoms instead of treating the root cause. The few times she came off of the hormones, she experienced extreme mood swings with crippling fatigue and was recommended to try antidepressants by doctors. Through lifestyle and dietary changes, as well as TCM and eating seaweed daily, she's finally finding that hormonal balance and is now on a mission to help all women do the same as they age. Hello, Sachi, Gabby. Welcome to the Pause Pod. I am super excited to have you both. Thank you so much for saying yes.
Thank you for inviting us. It's such a joy and pleasure to be on here with you.
Thank you, Dixie. We're very excited to chat with you today.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's just dive right into it. We'd love to get to know both of you a little bit more. So why don't you share with us your background and tell us how your work informs this project, Rootless. Give us some background information.
Happy to go first. This is Sachi. I am the founder and CEO of Rootless, and we joke that I am Seaweed's number one fan, but hopefully you will all be Seaweed's number one fan after this podcast. I grew up in India, so actually very much inspired by Ayurveda, food as medicine. My grandma and mom used to talk about it all the time. And as a youth, of course, I never listened to them. And now, going through this full circle moment where I'm like, oh, okay, what they were saying made a lot of sense back then. So, moved to the States for undergrad, and pretty early in my career, stumbled into the climate and ocean space. So, prior to starting Rootless, I'd spent about a decade of my professional life working on international climate change solutions, think tanks, philanthropy, nonprofit, academia. I got my master's in environmental management from Yale. So, just super wonky, super deep in the space. And it was a space of doom and gloom. That's kind of so much climate anxiety, so much incremental, super important, but incremental change. And I discovered seaweed in this journey of exploration. And it was truly the first thing that made me feel like there was some hope for a future that was regenerative, healthier, more sustainable. So I quit my job in climate philanthropy in late 2020 to build Rootless as a way to get more people to eat and grow sustainable seaweed. So seaweed, the reason that why we love her is she's one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. So each species has a slightly different nutrition profile. As a kale and as a spinach, would have a slightly different nutrition profile. But broadly, we're talking high quality protein, dietary fiber, vitamins, minerals, trace minerals, bioactives, phytonutrients. And it's the regular consumption of seaweed that has been linked with reduced rates of metabolic syndrome disease and hormonal imbalance in communities that are eating seaweed regularly in Korea, in Japan, in Okinawa. There is also an interesting correlation between communities that are living the longest, healthiest lives and the consumption of seaweed. So there's something interesting there also with this blue zone diet and longevity.
Mm.
And I think the thing that we are so inspired by at Rootless is there's this rich cultural, historical storytelling legacy around seaweed being used as both a food and a medicine. And the science is finally catching up. So now you have all of these incredible research articles that are talking about the bioactives in seaweed having pretty significant impact on cancer, on menopause symptoms, on hormone imbalance symptoms. So our mission really is to get more seaweed into your daily life. And that's why we developed our first product, which is called the Daily Bite, which is just an easy food as medicine supplement. You'd eat one a day as you would a multivitamin. Get that super potent hit of seaweed nutrition without having to taste the ocean, which I know not a lot of people love to do.
Got it. All right. I love that. So we're going to come back to some things that you talked about. I love this blue zone analogy. We'll come back to that. Gabby, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
So I have always been really interested in food. And I think that throughout my career, a lot of the things that have kind of, I mean, personally, but also coming from an Italian family, food is very important. And a lot of your day actually goes with food, and the culture around eating food is like taking time, enjoying it. And that has always been really important to me. But really, when food, this whole idea of like food as medicine became clear to me, and just the idea that like the lifestyle changes that you make can really impact every element of your life. Like that's when everything kind of clicked and came together for me. But I worked in food innovation for a long time, working for CPG companies and coming up with, new flavors, new products, really innovative, but always based in consumer insight. So really listening to consumers of like, what do you want or need that you're not currently getting? And I think that when I met Sachi and when I saw what she was doing at Rootless, it really brought together, I say, all of my passions and kind of all of my interests together. So it was just a dream scenario for me, where I not only have worked in food, but I've also studied traditional Chinese medicine, and I got a doctorate in that, specifically focusing on women's health. And when, she told me about the hope that she sees in seaweed for sustainability and for climate, that was just this really powerful message. But the fact that we're doing something innovative in taking seaweed and really applying it to this women's health that we don't see anyone else really talking about was really interesting as well, because the idea that we can really help and shape a narrative is building something new. And that is also a really big passion of mine. So not only have I worked in food, but I've worked in the plant medicine space, and then now working with women really to try and help find balance in their lives through what they're eating, those lifestyle decisions that they're making every day, how they're sleeping, how they're thinking about their health, and not necessarily wanting to go the traditional route. Maybe that traditional route hasn't worked for them, but they're really open, and especially nowadays want to learn and be educated about all the different solutions and possibilities that are out there. So seaweed has really been a part of the traditional, a lot of the traditional medicines around the world, like Sachi alluded to. It has been in the materia medica for traditional Chinese medicine. A lot of cultures eat it every day and experience the health benefits that Sachi mentioned as well. But above and beyond that, I think we're like really just starting to discover how it fits in with our lifestyles and with our the Western diet, the Western world. And it's just really exciting to be a part of the beginning stages of that.
So tell us a little bit more about how the two of you came together. When did this actually happen on the Rootless journey?
Sachi has been building this company and has really been learning a lot and doing so many amazing things throughout the progress of building Rootless. And she was really looking for a chief of staff, someone who, has built a lot of this type of company and all of that before. And I had been following her journey. Actually, I love following innovative companies that are doing things that I'm just really excited about. And I think I'd been following her for about a year, just like engaging with the content, seeing it. And my friends and I like to send each other, just check this out. Have you seen this? This is so cool, So it was one of those types of moments where I didn't actually know her personally, but I felt like I did based on just the content that she was putting out and all of the messaging. So I sent her a bit of a love letter, a little bit like, I feel like I'm the perfect person for this role because I'm so passionate about everything that you're doing. And I think it's funny because we might get to this, but Sachi writes a lot of love letters as well to women, especially, and that she respects, of what they're building and what they're growing. And it's kind of a bit of a theme, a little bit of our company, that we are really just in awe of like what you can accomplish when you can bring people together who have shared goals, shared vision.
It was a very effective love letter. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive a bit into your menopausal journey because, of course, what attracts me, not just the fact that this is food and food is indeed medicine. I love that message, but also the fact that you've carved out a space for people going through the menopausal journey. So let's talk about the two of you and where you are on your menopausal journey.
Sure. So I am 33. I do not think I am in perimenopause or menopause yet. And I've had my own kind of tryst with the world of hormones and hormone imbalance and people not taking me seriously. So when I was 13, actually, I would say most of my life up until very recently, I've just had the worst acne, just the worst, cystic acne. And it was one of those, and I grew up in India. And it was one of those really frustrating experiences where, because it was sort of like, it was an external thing, right? It's like the
Mhm.
way that you kind of, it impacts the way that you present in the world. And acne prone skin, I guess, is not a thing that anyone wants, whether they're a teen or older. But I have been diagnosed and misdiagnosed and re-diagnosed and undiagnosed, several times with polycystic ovarian syndrome, with hormonal imbalance issues. And this whole time, no one was ever able to find any cysts. It was just kind of bouncing around from one specialist to another. Everyone was pointing the finger at each other. No one was able to give me any sort of clarity on what was going on in my body, which was clearly out of balance in some way. And I actually got on pretty, I would say, damaging medication, like the equivalent of Accutane, where everything just dries up and you feel like a little shriveled human. I was on metformin for a period of time and actually got so sick that I remember I had to go to get an MRI to see if something like was damaged in my body. I was on birth control on the pill for about 15, 16 years. And that was the only thing that sort of kept the acne in check. But I was still navigating, hormonal acne. And 2 years ago, actually, based on the advice of an Ayurvedic doctor, I got off birth control for the first time. And it also coincided with while I was building Rootless. And, I think something happens also when you're in the belly of the beast and you learn how food is made in this country and how supplements are not regulated. And this journey has completely changed the way that I think about nutrition and healing and food and supplements. And really, the only kind of supplement I'm taking now is seaweed. But something happened, in the last 2 years, despite, I'm all turning all white and my sleep cycles are all over the place, but my skin completely cleared up. I think I lost maybe 15 pounds and I feel like my body's back in balance. And I think it was rooted in food, in the power of just plain, simple, whole food that helped my body kind of regulate itself. And that has been really inspiring for me because that's really informed, the way that we're thinking about the Rootless journey and the women that we're trying to create value for with this product, with this brand, with this community.
Similar to Sachi, but very different. I don't think that I'm yet in perimenopause or menopause personally myself, but as a TCM practitioner, I work with a lot of women that are. And even, throughout the course of my clinical work, it has been really interesting to see just the different forms that it manifests in, and also to be more educated and prepared myself for like what I can do and what the options are, because it's not really anything that I had ever been exposed to before. But similar to Sachi, I had a lot of hormonal fluctuations and issues throughout my life. I was put on a birth control very young as well, and was on it for over 20 years. And it's interesting because I feel like so many of the women even that I treat have similar journeys and things throughout their life where they may have even experienced some symptoms of like early perimenopause or menopause based on taking, different medication or different health issues that they've experienced. And so is really interesting that it's not necessarily even limited to those that are actually going through like a natural menopause. And the more and more that I've talked about my own experiences, the more and more people share their experiences. And so I think that's really the biggest thing is like, if you ask your mom, like we have asked our moms, and it's very like, oh yeah, no, I don't really remember, like there's not much to share really there. And we're really hopeful that by talking about the experiences and by feeling comfortable sharing like everything that you go through with, daughters, friends, other people in your network, that we can really not only just educate, but clear a lot of the like misinformation, I think, that is out there, the uncertainty, even the fear in a lot of ways. We have a few younger women on our team, and since we've been diving into this journey, they have said, we know so much about, like, we would not have known this otherwise, that it doesn't feel so, like I might not actually experience menopause for 20 years or what have you, but I feel like ready. I feel prepared. And I feel like that is such a huge shift that we're going to start to see in our culture, hopefully, where we can talk about these things. And it is comfortable, like if it ever is going to be uncomfortably comfortable or whatever, to actually be vulnerable and share what we're all kind of dealing with and going through.
The two of you, younger women, have opened up, and this conversation has changed from when my mother was going through menopause. I knew absolutely nothing. I think she feels a little bit more comfortable because I ask her so many questions, but you are way ahead of the game. And this intergenerational conversation that's happening is what's changed the zeitgeist of menopause and the narrative and paradigm around it, which I'm super excited about. So, yeah, let's just continue to share, because what you're doing for yourselves and for the generation to come is so impactful and so empowering. And that's what we need. Of course, along with solutions, which we're going to start talking about. So, Sashi, the number one seaweed fan. Is that okay? Are you the self-proclaimed number one seaweed fan? Okay, so what encouraged your fandom?
I really think it's the nutrition profile. Like, there really is nothing else like it. It is one of the
Mm,
most nutrient dense and diverse foods on the planet. And I think the thing that I'm really excited about and inspired by, which is in a little bit of a sharp, this is a hot take, but it's in a sharp contrast to the way that we're thinking about innovation in the plant based space, the food space today, which is it's not made in a lab. Like I think the things that stand the test of time, which is the most powerful indicator of success, those are the things that we need to be investing in. We need to go back and kind of re-look at indigenous cultural wisdom, right? Like these things are in our knowledge system for a reason. So the fact that seaweed is used as a medicine and has been since the beginning of time in cultures all over the world, there's all of these beautiful stories in Nordic mythology about seaweed being used on kind of voyages. There's some fun Viking stuff in there. In Japan, seaweed was actually so valuable that you could pay your taxes with seaweed. I think all the way up
wow.
to pretty recently. There's this beautiful Korean tradition till today, Korean and birthday tradition, where after a mother gives birth, the first thing that her mom feeds her, speaking of your ancestral intergenerational wisdom, is seaweed soup because it replenishes all the things that your body has just lost in this incredibly traumatic event. So I think there's nothing more powerful than going back to our roots, if you will, and learning from ancient wisdom. So I think the interesting spin here is we're also trying to modernize it in some way, right? It's like
Mm,
not a lot of people we found, we're big seaweed fans in all the shapes and forms that it exists in, but not a lot of people in the West, I would say, enjoy the umami, briny, oceanic flavor profile of seaweed. So we tried to develop a product that would allow everyone, whether you like the taste of seaweed or not, to access the health benefit, regardless. So we have a bunch of flavor profiles. We put some dates and almonds in there. You can still kind of get that umami craveability you can get from seaweed, which is why it keeps actually people going back for more. But it's not briny, which I would say is the kind of number one barrier to entry. And I think my obsession for seaweed and inspiration, I would say rather, around it has grown since we've started to put this product out on the market because we just get such incredible, compelling feedback from our consumer base about how these bites are impacting their health. It's all women. It's actually super interestingly all mostly women over 40, over 50, and it is impacting energy levels. It's impacting gut health. It's impacting hormonal health. We did a consumer study where we surveyed women. There were two women under 40, but mostly 40 and above, and had them eat the bites for a regularly over a period of 4 weeks. Literally 100% of them felt a difference as measured by their energy levels, hormonal acne, that dryness that happens when you're going through perimenopause,
yes.
menopause, bloating, constipation, stomach aches. And the kind of wild thing that happened was some of these women actually stopped experiencing these symptoms altogether within a period of time. We had a couple of women who said that their night sweats completely stopped after taking the bites for a couple of months. So I really, go back to this idea of like food is medicine. Let's just go back to like, traditional indigenous wisdom and knowledge and find ways to get it into the food system that are sustainable.
Gotcha. Let's just go back for a minute and talk about seaweed. What is it? Because I don't think everybody even understands and knows what seaweed is. Like, paint a picture of where they can find it, tell us what it is, so that we can really get some clear pictures of what we're talking about.
Very, very fair and good question. So seaweed is a form of macroalgae. It's a very broad word. I would say saying seaweed is like saying the word plant, or vegetable, depending on how you frame it. There are, I think, over 12,000 species of seaweeds. The big groupings are red, green, brown. The reason actually that they could be such a powerful food source for the future, and why we're so excited about building the sustainable regenerative supply chain around them, is because they don't need anything to grow. Really, they grow in the ocean. They don't need land, fresh water, fertilizer, pesticide. All they need is ocean water and sunlight. They grow really quickly depending on the species. I think some species of kelp grow up to 2 feet a day. As they're growing, they're absorbing all kinds of things from their environment, including carbon, including nitrogen, phosphorus. They're actually making the oceans healthier as they're growing. And there have been these incredible studies to show that when seaweed is grown in the water column that has shellfish and other marine flora and fauna, the shellfish are actually healthier. So it's this incredible, like, virtuous vegetable that is actually making the oceans healthier as it's growing and absorbing some amount of carbon as well, which, at scale, the research is still early, but at scale could have an impact on global climate change. And I think, the last piece of it is also, it is providing access to livelihoods. Like, the seaweed economy is providing access to livelihood, diversified livelihood, reliable livelihood to coastal communities that can't depend on the fishing industry or the lobster industry, for example, in Maine, as reliably anymore. So we have these beautiful kelp forests and seaweed farms that are that really could be the farms of the future, and they just require a fraction of the input that we need for land-based agriculture. So. And then I think, on the one last point on the food piece is that all species of seaweed are actually edible. Whether you want to eat them or not, I don't know. 'Cause they were a little bit hardier than others, but it really is like untapped potential, truly.
Where do you get your seaweed from?
We are currently sourcing our seaweed from Maine and Ireland.
Mhm.
We are very intentional about our seaweed sourcing because
Mhm.
we want to make sure that we can source it from farms who are farming regeneratively, they're harvesting regeneratively. Seaweed is a great is incredible because if it's found everywhere. It's super abundant, and you can go out and actually harvest it for free as long as you leave some of it back so the crop can regenerate. So it's actually it's a free resource that anyone can access if they know how to regeneratively harvest the thing. We are working with a Maine-based operation that is one of the OGs in the space. They actually helped set up the organic certification back in the 90s. Employee owned. They just know. I would say actually they're probably bigger seaweed fans than I am.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And we found the equivalent of main coast sea vegetables in Ireland. So we're sourcing from these two farms today. We are actually launching a new blend of seaweeds that we'll be sourcing from various different places, all within the same constructs of, sustainably sourced, responsibly harvested, making sure it's not downstream from any pollution. We're doing all of that third party heavy metal testing to ensure that the seaweed that you're eating every day is truly minimally processed and clean.
Okay, so Sashi, you're the CEO, of course, and founder of Rootless. Gabby, what is your role at Rootless, and what are your thoughts on seaweed as support, especially for menopause?
Yeah, so I am the chief of staff at Rootless. I also get to play an amazing dual role as Dr. Gabby. And really, I love this idea that as chief of staff, I mean, it varies, I think, from company to company, but getting to really work with Sachi on the strategy behind what we're doing and making sure that we set our goals and our expectations for what we want to achieve and that we can collaborate and really kind of help build out what we want to do as a team. So our team is very small but mighty, and we are all women. And we are really excited specifically about the idea of like growing this sustainable infrastructure of seaweed as we like continue to build out this, what's supposed to be a $600 billion opportunity in menopause, as well as,
Mhm.
just the idea that there's these two markets that are kind of growing and happening at the same time. It is, like you said, the zeitgeist is of the moment right now. More and more people are talking about seaweed. More and more people are talking about women's health. And the fact that they're growing together is very exciting to us. I think that I am also really excited to be able to introduce more people. Like, seaweed is difficult, I think, to incorporate into your diet on a regular basis if you're not familiar with it. And what we see a lot of times is that people say, oh my gosh, I love seaweed. I eat those seaweed sheets and I buy them, in bulk, and I eat them every day. And I think that is great. We want people, like we said, to eat more seaweed. We don't really necessarily how they're eating it, but we wanted to add more variety into how people are thinking about or eating seaweed. Because if you don't know much about it, you don't maybe even know where you can get it other than in those seaweed sheets. You don't know how to cook it. There's a lot of also misinformation, I think, around what is like too high, too low, and some of the nutritional values that can come into seaweed. So just, again, having these conversations around everything that we're seeing in the latest research that is supporting a lot of that, I'm really enjoying getting to be a part of that. But it's very much like, it feels like an introduction to a lot of ways for people. We say, try to take this every day and see how you feel, and try to eat a little bit of seaweed every day. I think ultimately it's difficult, right? If you have to cook it or clean it, or whatever, like we said, we want to make it easy and convenient, and really start to have it be this amazing ritual that you're not only thinking about what you're eating or what you're actually getting into your body through seaweed. But one of the things that really ties in, I think, is the idea of rootless, like this concept of the name of the company is Rootless. And seaweed is technically rootless. It is not a plant that has roots, but we always as a team go back and forth between, am I feeling rootless and what does that mean to us? And I think there's this beautiful thing that we can learn from seaweed, which is to give back to the earth and give back to, all the things. It's a very healing, not even just, emotionally, physically, but holistically start to think about how you can really even embody the best parts of seaweed. It is adaptable. It is, so when I'm manifesting now, I'm envisioning this seaweed. It's it gives back to the earth. It doesn't take from the earth. It can move. It can really flex and flow. And I think that is so beautiful. But also, the idea that being really present, being really grounded, but you can also be rootless from negativity. You can be rootless from symptoms or the things that you feel like might be holding you back. So there's just a lot, I think, that we can learn from seaweed outside of just that, the benefits of eating it as well, which I wanted to call attention to, because I think it's so beautiful how I've been exposed through working with Rootless and Sachi's passion of seeing all this amazing, seaweed art. Who even knew that seaweed art is such an amazing, beautiful, creative expression form that I had never been exposed to before.
Oh, wow. So it seems that there's a lot to uncover, a lot to discover about Rootless, about seaweed. One of the things that got me excited was how convenient it is. I've got the box right here and I'm finished with mine, but it was so delicious and so convenient to not just pop in my mouth, but also pop into my smoothies. And what I would like for you to share is what makes it, what are the ingredients, what are the components that makes it such a useful supplement for menopause and just for overall health?
Yeah, so Sachi really developed this product to be food ingredients first and really simplicity from the beginning. So dates, almonds, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, seaweed, right? It is that simple. And a lot of the ingredients have their own benefits, but synergistically work really together with seaweed to provide the ultimate benefits that we're talking about, which I think it's easy on your digestion. It is convenient. The taste is not sweet, not savory, but really kind of, like you said, can be incorporated into your diet in a variety of ways. I personally take mine first thing in the morning. I'm not necessarily wanting to eat like a big breakfast when I wake up. I love the idea of incorporating it into a smoothie because it adds a lot of the things that you might be adding to your smoothie already, in a kind of quick and convenient form as well. But just taking the time, I think, to sit and savor it. It is not just like a swallow situation. It's like a couple bites. You really need to kind of take the almost like presence and take a moment to savor it. But I think each of the ingredients has been really thoughtfully added to provide different benefits. Like Sachi was saying, there's some fiber, there is protein, and specifically as it relates to menopause, I think there is definitely some estrogen interaction that's happening, specifically with the seaweed, that is still like very little researched, not a surprise here yet. I think it's very interesting and we want to see more research happening in this area. But the iodine from seaweed is, and I can't believe that we're this far in and this is the first time I think we're saying iodine, but
That never happens.
it's really, really important for your thyroid. And I think, Sachi and I keep saying iodine is going to be like the fiber of the future. Like people are going to be talking about this because your thyroid regulates so many things in your body. And people don't even realize, men have thyroids too, is a question that I get like all the time. And that just tells you like how little people know about your thyroid. But the iodine actually helps create some of the hormones that your thyroid needs to function. And a lot of women, as they're entering menopause, may actually be experiencing hypothyroid or even hyperthyroid symptoms and think that they're actually experiencing menopause. So there is definitely a lot of synergy there. And I think that the other piece is that you really have to eat iodine to be able to get it. It's not necessarily something your body creates, but along with a lot of the other like minerals and trace minerals and nutrients that you're going to be getting, you can't necessarily put them all in the package. But like Sachi said, seaweed has, just so many amazing natural compounds, bioactives, and things that are happening in there that are being researched even more now. But this idea that there's actually a specific amount that you should be getting every day of all of these things to actually balance your system and hormones. And this is starting to be researched as well. So there is a right amount of seaweed, of iodine, of everything that you want to be getting. So for the first time, the US and other first world countries are actually experiencing iodine deficiency, specifically in women of reproductive age. And learning this was just like really eye-opening, I think, because if you talk to, a friend, daughter, loved one who is pregnant and you're like, hey, take a look at your prenatals, a lot of them don't have iodine in them, but there's a lot of studies actually showing, how iodine can help with fetal development, brain development in children, and all of that sort of stuff. But we're not using as much iodized salt as a culture, as people are switching to using different types of salt. And Sachi and I love to give people fun homework to go home, check which type of salt you're using. On it, it will likely say, like, this is not a necessary source of iodide, which is a necessary nutrient. And so it's, again, just this education. You can get it from dairy, you can get it from eggs, but if you are vegan or trying to eat more plant-based, seaweed is really, one of the easier ways to get iodine into your diet. So it is pretty complex, I would say, from like just all of the different health aspects. And like I said, a lot of them are still early days in the research, but what we're seeing is the reasons that like it's really important for like a women's reproductive journey is there's so much hormone fluctuation, like your estrogen levels and all of that. But what I was starting to say is in countries like Sachi was mentioning, where women eat a lot of soy and also seaweed, they're seeing, that they don't have as high of incidences of breast cancer and some of these other issues because of both of these. I think people used to think it was really related to soy, but through the process of estrogen flushing and balancing the digestive system is actually how these mechanisms we're starting to learn are actually working.
I think there's something super interesting to add to that about this axis of thyroid, sex hormones, and gut. And
Mhm.
it's been such an interesting learning journey for us. I mean, where I'll say, I'm new to the space, and I want to continue lifelong learner. Continue to learn as the space as more information comes into the space, but there's a level of balance that I think nutrient dense foods can give you as you're going through this journey. And I think that is the thing that is making people feel good. So one is obviously the iodine, the thyroid. The feedback that we hear from women. And if women are iodine deficient in their reproductive years, there's a likelihood that they're iodine deficient in their menopausal years because your thyroid uptake or your thyroid function actually decreases over time. So then iodine uptake also decreases over time.
Mhm.
So we know that that's happening, and the way that we this manifests in the feedback is I have more energy, I'm not chronically fatigued. And it's Dixie, it's not this boost of energy. Like we talk about this, and not to kind of say anything against men or males, but there's this like testosterone driven like boost of energy, caffeine, 5 hour energy.
Right,
Like
right.
it's not that. It's actually sustained energy. It's all day energy. It's feminine energy. And I think there's something so beautiful about eating something that can fuel your battery, your thyroid, that can help you just do life more. It's I have more energy to work out. I'm sleeping better at night. I don't have these like crazy crashes that come with a boost of kind of caffeine and that kind of energy. So that's been a really interesting thing. And then I really think there's something interesting here about gut. So the fiber in seaweed, both the fiber from the dates and the almonds, yes, but the prebiotic fiber that you find as a bioactive in the actual plant, it has been linked with estrogen flushing. So the way that you see those charts of your hormone imbalance in perimenopause, menopause, where the hormones are like all over the place, roller coaster. There's something really interesting about this fueling this axis that reduces the standard deviations across this. In this time of your life. So the thing that we keep coming back to is balance. It is options exist. We are in no way saying that this is like the silver bullet to solving all of your perimenopausal symptoms or addressing all of your perimenopausal menopausal symptoms. But we do believe that foundational nutrition, nutrient dense foods, whole foods, seaweed, this should be a part of your nutrition protocol as you're navigating all the kind of options that exist out there. And options exist. So we actually want to shine more light on hormones, on natural options, on allopathic, on homeopathic. These exist, and for us, the first step really is how do we kind of open the door with conversation, with storytelling, with the work that you're doing, Dixie, around making women sort of like feel valid in this experience that they're going
Mhm.
through, and
Mhm.
just noting that like hormonal acne for 10 years, 20 years is not normal. Like chronic fatigue is not normal. Your bones being on fire are not normal. So let's talk about it. Let's actually strip this of shame and guilt and all of these like deep things that we have to navigate with our identities as women, and let's just share more. Let's talk more.
Yeah, love this conversation, especially the fact that you are bringing so much awareness to thyroids because I suffered from cystic acne for a very long time throughout my 12 years of perimenopause. And in my research, what I discovered was that my body needed iodine. And doctors would talk to me about there's this hormone, there's that hormone, but none ever mentioned thyroid. They'll check my T4 levels, but never what my T3 levels were. So if you go to my kitchen cupboard now, you'll find a bottle of iodized salt. Okay, so let's move on and talk about the science behind seaweed. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about it, but share with us some more in terms of what science is saying about seaweed and what it can do for our health and our well being.
So I think that what's really exciting about the science of seaweed is, like I said, it's really there's a lot more I think that needs to be done, but it's very promising from what we're seeing so far. There are a lot of links to eating small amounts of seaweed every day, actually positively impacting everything from digestion to energy. And like we said, it's really driven by the thyroid. And Dixie, I'm so glad you said what you said, because I feel like a lot of people don't know necessarily what to ask when they go to the doctor about their thyroid, but you can ask, for a full thyroid panel. They might not like originally come out and offer it, and they might ask you why and things like that. But I think the more you can know about your levels is what we see, in general. But there are studies from all over the world showing how eating seaweed can actually help, like Sachi said. There's an interesting tie with actually lowering blood pressure. It's really incredible how many different things have been linked positively, I think, from a health perspective to eating seaweed. But like Sachi said, there's so many different types of seaweed. So what you'll see are like specific studies that have been done using just like one type of seaweed. And we hope to be able to add to this like growing body of evidence of just that's out there of eating seaweed. And then from I think the environmental side, and Sachi can definitely speak more to this. We saw a really encouraging study that came out at the beginning of this year that really kind of changed everything, which is, as a culture, if we can eat 10% of our diet as seaweed by 2050, just like the environmental impacts that can have on the planet, lessening our reliance on what's grown on the land, and really kind of shifting some of that. And already in places like Korea and Japan, there's varying numbers, but like they're getting potentially some people close to that level of eating seaweed in their diet. And so I think that it is really exciting to see all the different things that, we've already talked about, from the thyroid, the iodine. I would love to see more specifically focused on perimenopause and menopause hormones. But this idea that and this was Sachi's, I think, original hypothesis, the more seaweed we can eat and grow sustainably, that we can actually make not only impacts to our personal health, but also then the planetary health as well.
And as Gabby said, which I think is super, super important, and I think I need to do a better job of communicating that seaweed, again, saying seaweed is like saying plant, So when we're talking, we need to be talking more in specifics around red seaweed, brown seaweed, kelp species, etc. So there's some really interesting work around the bioactives in brown seaweed specifically, which is kelp. It's kelp is mostly a cold water species. Actually, kelp is what grows in the U.S. and parts of the northern hemisphere. Two bioactives are now being picked up by pharma and the FDA, so you know that there's something interesting happening there. They're called fucoidan and fucoxanthin, and they are actually being researched for their antimicrobial, antiviral, anti-carcinogenic properties. There's some super interesting studies that show both animal trials, some double-blind trials. A lot of these are still in the phase of in vitro, cell-based trials. There was one really interesting study that showed the type of seaweed that actually we're using currently in our bites, a red type. It killed colon cancer cells when it was in vitro in a petri dish. So there's something about the prebiotic fiber in there that's actually killing cancer cells. I think the way that this ladders up to population level data, to go back to this point of longevity in blue zones, is super interesting. And I would say that's the big missing body of work. It's like there's labs, there's cell culture, there's animal trials, there's maybe even some double blind controlled studies that are talking about the impacts of eating, the science backed a little bit of seaweed, whether it's between 1 gram to 5 grams every day, the impact it has on blood sugar control, on cholesterol, on heart disease. All of these studies kind of exist, in small parts of the scientific world. There's a big gap that is missing, I would say, in the research that ties us back to why is it that people who are living in Okinawa, Japan, and US, there's actually the study that I can share with you, they're living longer, healthier lives. And this is as measured by the absence of deaths due to metabolic syndrome disease. And metabolic syndrome disease is, cancer, obesity, diabetes, all of these chronic lifestyle based, I mean, not to say cancer is lifestyle based, but these kind of lifestyle based diseases is just isn't as prevalent in these communities. And actually the chart shows Okinawa as having the least amount of deaths, Japan a little bit more, than the US significantly more. So I think there's, going back to this idea of like proof points, there's something really interesting there in terms of what is it in this thing that is doing this, and how do we scale that body of research while continuing to ensure that we're integrating it, to Gabby's point, in the food system at this level, that we can both impact women's health, community health, and planetary health.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that because I know there is a blue zone in California in Loma Linda. What are they eating that keeps their bodies vital well into their hundreds, right? Maybe they're eating some of the kelp from California. Who knows? So, Sashi, you said that seaweed is the future of farming, food, and planetary health. Tell us a little bit more about that.
It's actually kind of quoting Gabby's the paper that Gabby referenced, and
Mhm.
really my entry point into the space was impact. It was
Right.
seaweed is, as we've described, a zero input regenerative crop that, as it grows, actively heals the environment in which it's growing,
Right.
and it provides access to livelihood, and it's really good for humans, and it reduces the agricultural burden on land, and it can transform our food system. So there's all of these things, win 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 win, that we can benefit from if we invest in a sustainable regenerative seaweed economy. I think this is the critical piece of the puzzle today, because like the things that are happening, with fucoidin and fucoxanthin, you're starting to see a lot more kind of big industry involvement, like big ag
Mm.
involvement in the seaweed industry. And I feel like we have a time limited window in which we can set this industry up to be regenerative, to be sustainable. Because if we don't, you're growing, the next source of protein, the next source of nutrition on the water. Like, all of these big guys are going to come in and do what they did on land with
Yes.
and monocrop and industrialize the ocean, which would not allow us to benefit from any of that regeneration. So I think we have, I would say like a 3 to 5 year window within which we can make global scale intervention in this space to ensure that we are farming this thing in a way that is sustainable, that's responsible, that's regenerative, that's benefiting indigenous communities, seaweed farmers, coastal communities, and we're creating and sharing in that value chain all the way to the woman who is ultimately eating this as a form of self-care, and like a ritualized form of self-care, and helping her feel better. And once you feel great, then you kind of reintegrate into your community and everyone around you feels great, right? So it's this beautiful virtuous cycle of impact and change I think we can build. And we're actually like kind of playing around with this new tagline for the company. So to would love to get your feedback of, this is really a space driven by seaweed. This is really a space where self-care can meet planetary care in a way that is meaningful and impactful. So yes, if your community or listeners wants to give us feedback on that, we would love that. But
I
we're
love
like,
it.
let's
Where
go.
self-care meets plant care. I think that's the genesis of self-care, really, you know?
Totally. And we
I
want
love
women, like,
that.
we want women to be a part of this movement. It's like we generate, I think, $36 trillion in consumer spending. We
Mm,
are the workhorses of the economy, and women do not see that value in in our wallets, in the people who represent us in the C-suite, on boards. So the other thing that we're super excited about is this crowdfunding campaign that we just launched, because we were just like, we ultimately want to create value for our stakeholders, and our stakeholders are these women, are our consumers. So let's go back to this idea of self-care, planetary care, financial care. Like, we want you to be shareholders, we want you to own a part of the company so that our success is your success, so we can actually build maybe even a new system of capital wherein, like, your spending power, the things that you're investing in as a consumer, you get to actually share in the value creation of that. So I don't know, where there's some synchronicity in the world, when you like put stuff out there. So that's all kind of at the tip of our fingertips right now.
Oh, no, that's so exciting. And I can't wait for you to tell us more about the crowdfunding campaign a little bit later. Gabby, why don't you add to what Sashi already said? If there's anything else you had to add about the future of, of sustainability when it comes to Rootless.
I mean, Sachi does such a beautiful job of talking about this like synchronicity, but the more I think seaweed that we can grow and the more seaweed that we can eat, it's like this beautiful cycle of, as more and more people are introduced to it, and also you can actually grow it yourself. You can, really even incorporate like your own creativity in how you cook it, how you do things with it. And it's great on skincare. It's not just about eating it. Like, I think the future for seaweed is bright. But I would say, like, what we're really conscious about is thinking through not just like the impact that we're having today on what we're doing with seaweed, but really how it can shape like so many generations in the future. For, like we say, there's three really pillars: self-care. So really how we think about like what we're eating, what we're putting on our skin, how we're interacting with the world, our communities. So really that idea of community care and making sure that everyone has enough. In times of famine, people survive on the coast by eating seaweed. So that's, something also really powerful to think about and share as a community, is like, this amazing plant can give back if you are in tune and in touch with how it grows, where it grows. There are different ways that it grows. You can wild harvest it, you can farm it in the ocean, you can actually grow it indoors. And there are, I think, different benefits to not only like the environmental impact of each of those, but actually the minerals and nutrients based on like where it grows and how it grows. So I think, to Sachi's point, this idea of really making sure we're not monocropping it, but that there is biodiversity in the people that get to experience it from eating it, but also like the actual places where it's grown. The more marine life that can thrive around that is really exciting. And then I think, other applications of seaweed that we've seen that are just starting to get really exciting as well is like seaweed as a plastic alternative. I think our dream would be to like have our packaging one day actually be made of seaweed as well.
Love
Yeah, that would be
that.
amazing. We're really hoping for that. The methane reduction from feeding seaweed to cows. There's just so many things. The carbon capture, that Sachi touched on earlier, that it really feels like there's nothing seaweed can't do. And I just continue every day, when I'm, like Sachi said, lifelong learner, learning more and more about seaweed and just seeing the different impacts that it can have on us, on our communities, and most importantly, I think the planet that we want to leave behind. It's really exciting and inspiring.
It's official. Seaweed is a multitasker. And I think you answered the question I was going to ask next, which was, looking ahead, what are some of the long term goals and how do you see them aligning with menopausal health? Sashi?
Great question. I think it goes back to those pillars that we're building the company around. Self care. It's not just the you're eating this every day. It's like you're taking a moment to yourself. It's this idea of like, women, we just have to take care of so many things. We have so many hats to wear. We have to, always show up. It's exhausting. I will say, I'm exhausted. The emotional labor. I mean, all of these are beautiful, great gifts that we get to do. And I think it's really, really important for you to invest in yourself, put your oxygen mask on first, fill your own cup, because when that cup is empty, you can't actually give to anyone else, you know? And I think I've actually been really, I feel like in my journey in Rootless, the first, year was operational. Like, how do we build the damn thing? The second year was how do we, what's the story? What's the kind of consumer data? What's the market opportunity here? And I would say, and learning about the seaweed and hormone thing. And I would say the journey that I'm now stepping into is like the seaweed and mental health journey. It's like we all need to take time to ourselves and for ourselves and fill our own cup. And I feel like as a woman, no one gives us permission to do that. So we need to give ourselves permission to do that. And we want to help as a brand, as a company, as humans, we want to help give you permission to do that as well. So we love the bites as a form factor. We love the fact that you actually have to slow down a little bit. You can create a ritual around it. We've had many, if you had to word cloud the feedback that we get on the bites, the one thing that people say the loudest is that they're craveable. It's like, I look forward to my daily bite every day. Like, whether a part of it is the taste of it, but also it's like this moment of quiet you get to take. It's rituals that you can share with your community. We've had a couple of very sweet videos, even that people have shared with a mom and her daughter eating her little strawberry bite, before the day starts, or a woman sharing the bites with her partner, a woman sharing the bites with her grandkids. So there's something about this ritual of self care that we love and are excited to continue to invest in. I think the next piece of that is community care. It's like, okay, you filled your cup. Now what? Now you're in a place where you can, and maybe even you filled your cup enough where you can be vulnerable in spaces that you were not vulnerable in before. I think to Gabby's point, once you say the words menopause or hormones or perimenopause in public spaces and create lower the barrier to entry for other women, you start to hear these beautiful stories that people will share with you. I'm sure you've experienced this, Dixie, with like, you say the thing and then the door opens and the floodgates open and then people are just sharing their experiences and stories with you. And we want to create, we haven't built this yet, so would love to work with you and figure out how to do this at a big scale. But like, how do we create that community where women feel comfortable, vulnerable, sharing their experiences, stories, so they're feeling more valid in this experience and less alone. So that's kind of the second piece. And then the third piece is, how do we continue to create value in this regenerative sustainable supply chain to ensure that the planet can benefit from all of these, things that the seaweed economy has to offer. So, our big kind of push is, and this is a part of the crowdfunding campaign too, is that we actually have an opportunity here to regenerate human planetary health. And it actually starts with you and your hormonal health. Like, this is one of those places where individual decisions, consumer decisions, can make big change in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so important because hormonal health drives everything about how we feel
Totally.
emotionally, physically, mentally. And it seems as though seaweed is touching on all of those important parts. And not
Totally.
only that, it's also touching on regeneration and sustainability and the planet. It's beautiful, actually. I love the story and I love the future in terms of where it's going and what it can do, the possibilities, and how it's evolving. So, self care is one of my biggest restorative practices. I just have to do something for myself every single day to restore my body, mind, and spirit. And in that spirit, I'm going to ask the two of you choose who goes first. 3 self care rituals that supports your well being, that fills up your cup so that you both can continue to do the work that you're doing in the world.
Dixie, can we ask you the question too?
Sure. I'll
Okay,
share.
you go first.
Okay, for me, every day, prayer.
Hmm.
Second, qigong, and third, a smoothie.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Simple but sweet.
Love it. Gabby, do you want to go?
Love it. For me, I don't set an alarm. I actually wake up kind of naturally and enjoy the quiet in the morning, usually with my tea.
Mm.
I love to go for a walk. I generally watch the sunrise. I wake up early. And it's just this like really beautiful moment time, whether it's yoga, stretching, walk, run, what have you, of like movement, breath, and it's just about quieting my mind before I jump into the day.
Yeah, I think mornings are also really kind of sacred for me. There's something about starting the morning quietly that is really energizing. So I would say, similar to Gabby, wake up early. I First thing I do is drink coffee, which as a as a CEO of a nutrition company, I don't know if many people would agree with that practice, but I love my morning coffee. So I drink coffee, I go for a walk, and I eat my bite. And the thing that I'm trying to, and that's grounding. I think the thing that I'm trying to introduce as my fourth self care ritual is forms of inspiration. I derive so much inspiration from storytelling and learning. So I really enjoy listening to podcasts in the morning. So that's the thing that I'm trying to lean into for my 2024 ritual.
Yeah. I love that. There's just something about mornings. It does set the tone for the day. Yes, AM it is. Okay, so talk to us about the crowdfunding campaign that you have coming up. Share with us what it's about, when it's going to get started. I'm sure listeners would love to learn more.
So we actually just on Friday opened up early access to this campaign. So it is available now. GetRootless.com / join the movement. And we really see this as a movement that is happening that we're actually also just a part of, which is women's health is and hormone health specifically and menopause are getting attention and funding finally. It
Mm,
is 2023 and there is more celebrity and like governmental and attention and focus. It feels like for the first time in a long time actually being brought to life, and we want to be part of that catalyst, for this movement. So, like Sachi said, it is a really exciting time for us. We really want to early access, meaning, share your interest now. We're actually about to launch a brand new flavor that we're really excited about.
mm,
And we are sending the new flavor out to anyone who joins our early access campaign before anyone else will get to try it. So that is very exciting. Also, the idea that we can really leverage and use our spending power to be part of this movement. So, as part of crowdfunding, you don't have to be an accredited investor. You don't ever have to invested in anything before, and you don't have to invest a lot. Your minimum investment of $500 is what a lot of people already spend on their self-care ritual for a few months, and so using that same amount of money, but to be part of this movement and this campaign towards further women's health is really what we're trying to educate about. So it is very, very exciting. We over the course of the weekend have gotten a lot of buy into this idea, and we're really excited to see how this will grow. We're going to officially open the campaign in the new year. We, in the wellness industry and in natural food, January, the new year, we're all starting to set these like new intentions, and really this idea of like investing in yourself means taking those self-care moments, means
mhm.
spending time with community, building community, whatever you're already going to be doing, but also to start thinking about your financial future and your financial health. And I think the thing that was really eye-opening for us is that stat that Sachi said about like women really influence the buying and spending power in our country, but we're not necessarily preparing ourselves for our financial future. So a lot of women, who are going through menopause might be also really stressed about their retirement, or might be stressed about, like, what if I can't work? and things like that. And so really starting to think about investing in all different ways. There's a lot of ways that we can further our investment. And I think, in general, women owned companies are not invested in as much. There aren't as many, women venture, opportunities, investment opportunities. And so this movement is also of the moment. And we wanted to build on that as well. So I think it's really important, no matter how you invest, let's start to educate and talk to each other about it too, and ask those questions and figure it out together.
I love, Gabby, the way that you described it, and I
That's
think
great.
the thing that I kind of keep going back to and hearing you speak to made me think of that there's also an element of like hesitation when it comes to talking about finances as women, right? Like we don't really share salaries, we don't really talk about like finances, like we don't talk about money. And I think there is, and what, there's something like shame, guilt, whatever kind of big emotion that there is there. I think there's something to think about and unpack there too, because going back to that point of like synchronicity, regeneration, I think that the TLDR is like we need to just talk more. We need to create spaces for more conversation, and just empower each other and advocate for each other to do that. So, actually, I haven't even said this out loud, but I had the thought that like one of our KPIs, I would say, for the crowdfunding campaign is like how many new investors, how many people can we get to invest in this campaign, whether it's $500 or more, who have never invested before. That would be a huge success for us
Mm.
because that's starting the conversation and that's helping take kind of control of or have agency in your financial future in the way that Gabby was describing. So, Gabby, one more thing to add to our our list.
That's so impactful. One of my pillars of self care is finances, simply because it's one of the biggest stressors for
Mhm.
women. Of course, because they don't talk about it. And there's, like you said, Sashi, there's so much shame attached to it. But opening up this conversation and this beautiful product for people to enter into something that's not just regenerative, but something that could be a source of financial security, I think is a wonderful opportunity. So thank you for even mentioning that. And I think that's one of the pointers you can throw out there in terms of how can it benefit you? Yeah.
Totally.
And open the conversation to talking about money shamelessly.
Totally. Yes. More
Yeah.
more shameless. I think that's the if there was like a word for 2024, I would say like I think we all need to be more shameless
Oh
without
gosh,
shame.
yes.
More without shame.
Shameless. I love that. Okay, so can you tell us again how to find, and I will put the website up on the show notes, but they can find information for the campaign on,
So
right, so get rootless
get
backslash.
this backslash, I think it's pages slash join the movement. But if you navigate to the website, we have a big thing in bold that says join us, and that'll
Perfect.
take you to the reservation page.
Okay, so y'all go to the website and join the movement, and information is going to be in the show notes. All right, so one more thing. It's a hypothetical question I just love asking guests. If either of you were a science or biology or even health curriculum developer, would you recommend teaching about menopause? Why or why not? And if yes, at what stage in a student's learning would you recommend introducing the topic of menopause?
I wholeheartedly would say yes. I think having the conversation, be part of overall learning, I think in general about our bodies is not something that women actually get a lot of. I think whether it's someone who I went to TCM school or someone who went to medical school, like one of the most interesting parts we're actually going in through like women's health classes where you like learn a ton about your body. And I'm just like, I feel like a lot of this should actually be taught, like maybe as part of a high school curriculum, maybe even middle school, because we really just don't understand. I think a way that the way that a lot of our bodies work. I think it also is just an incredible thing that not a lot of women know this, but you're born with like how many eggs you're going to have. And there is nothing else like that out there. Like this is like a really unique and special thing. And just, there's so many unique and interesting things about women's health and the woman's body that I think should definitely be taught, because it opens up questions. It opens up opportunities for conversation and sharing, and like learning about it in school and then going home and talking about it with your family or your friends, things like that. So I definitely think, for me, the answer is yes. And I would love to see menopause really, for the reasons we talked about like in the very beginning, is like, I think one of the things that I've heard just from a lot of women is like, when it happens, they feel blindsided. They feel like they did not know what to expect, or none of the people that they've talked to are experiencing the things that they are. And that is not okay. That they should know what is coming or know what to expect, and actually be able to do something now, today, like to potentially even know that you don't have to experience these things. So I think that something that someone said, which was really interesting, is like, everyone will experience menopause. Like, it doesn't have to be a negative experience. It can actually, like, the framing that we like to talk about is like, it can be a beginning. It can be, I mean, up to like a third, a fourth, like it's like of some women's lives. Like, it is a period of time where like you get to reimagine, recreate, re-envision this like really beautiful, positive aspect of your life. And I hope that that's the way that it could be framed in this curriculum, because I think so many, ideas and unfortunately, in society, are that it's like a negative, or it can be, like just this really terrible time. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. And so just having these conversations and education around it can reframe that for us.
I also think
Beautiful.
there's such a I feel like there's such a poignant moment in like a mother-daughter relationship, let's say, where you're talking to your daughter about periods, or as a daughter you're receiving information about your periods, like, I wonder if that's the point of intervention, where you're really talking about, when you hit puberty, that is when your hormone journey starts. And I feel like that could be a really interesting place for you to talk about how your hormones kind of fluctuate through, your life. And the big transitions are the big transition you're going through right now. And and like, it's normal. It's okay. There's fear, there's such big feelings at that stage. And there's an equivalent amount of big feelings when you're in your fertility journey, or you're pregnant, or you're postpartum, that people are not talking about. So like, the atmospherics and the volume around you reduces, and then when you hit that big period of transition or transformation and menopause, there's no one talking to you. So maybe the curriculum is like turning the volume dial up on all of these transitions that your hormones and your body and your feelings are going to go through. But let's talk about it when you're 10. Let's talk about when you're 12. And let's get men involved with our conversation, because you should know what your sisters, daughters, girlfriends, partners, friends, moms are going through, so that you can show up for them, in a way that is like thoughtful, and not think that they're just like moody all the time.
Yes, I love it. Beautiful, both of you. You hit on all the key things that needed to be said that I absolutely embrace in terms of menopause and the conversations that need to have. And it took me back to one thing that I kept hearing from the both of you, which is community care, and the fact that your mother, brother, sister, spouse, significant other, everybody within your life and your circle are members of your community, and having this conversation with them empowers the entire community to support you. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Just before we go, I know it's time is almost up. Rootless. So this is the package that I got from Rootless at our event, and it's amazing. I totally identify with the craving for this. There is a
Love that.
little hint of salt on the tongue, and it just feels good. I do feel energized. I love it. It's a beautiful product. So before you go, tell us where we can find you, where we can purchase this product.
So we are predominantly a direct-to-consumer brand today. We are available on our website. You can shop directly and you can try a month's supply. You can also subscribe and receive it every month. We really encourage you when you try it to try it every day. The people who see, I would say, the most benefits, just like any sort of supplement or medication or anything that you're taking, you actually have to take it to feel the benefits. So really figuring out a way, like we all talked about, to incorporate it into your daily routine. And that box is meant to be your reminder, your ritual reminder. So put it somewhere prominent, like whether it's on your nightstand, on your countertop, where you're going to actually see it. And it's kind of that cue to remind you to take it, even when the craveability starts, maybe even before you see it and you remember to take it. And behind Sachi, you can see we actually recently launched some compostable packaging. We are starting to get into retail friendly formats because we would also love to expand our footprint in terms of retail. We are looking at partnering with spas and drugstores and health kind of cues, self-care places where you're already going to get educated about the benefits of these next year. So we would love to expand. And if you know of any retailers, that are local that you would love us to work with, please let us know. We have a fair page where they can find us as well. So yeah, that is really our goal, is to get it out so that you start to see it everywhere where it can cue you and remind you of all the benefits from taking it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both so much for sharing with us. I really appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Dixie.
Dixie.
Grateful.
We
You're
This
appreciate
welcome.
was
you.
amazing. What a beautiful conversation.
Dear listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you on the next podcast. And as always, let's perimenopause and prosper.